Good morning, everyone. Welcome to God's Grace on Thee. Today is Thursday. It is December the 26th of 2024. It is now 9:19 a.m. in Reno, Nevada. And it's 42 degrees. It feels like 30, and there's rain in our forecast. So by 10 o'clock, we should be receiving some showers, and it is now 9:20 a.m. The sun is out. Okay, so today I want to continue on with the rise of the Antichrist. This is volume 4, and I want to skip chapter 6 because it's just a continuation that we've been learning from who the Jews are, where they came from, how they've established themselves, and how they've managed to intertwine everything that they touch into their own secret realm, their own world. And everything and everybody lives off that. So they control what's going round and round, basically. But today I want to go into chapter 7. And this is recording 1 Haton, Wednesday, March 4th, 1998, 7:26 a.m., year 11, day 200. On hating evil. That's our topic. It is said that we prejudge what we do not know, and we hate what we do not understand. This is a good observation that doesn't quite fit the circumstance when you begin to know and to understand. Hate, under any circumstance, is a waste of time, for usually with hatred comes the desire for some sort of revenge. For you know not that which has not affected you personally. To prejudge is only one step from being judgmental if you have no knowledge. In both instances, it can only pay one handsomely to become informed. Then at least you can discern what it is and what it is not. In either instance, you can only deal with that which becomes known or visible. It is also said that I write on hate-presenting topics, such as this, when learning of the Jews. No, this cannot be so, for when you know and understand, there is no room for hatred. There is no reason that man cannot individually grow up through whatever negative circumstance exists for. And once you see, you too can use the methods within the law and within that intent and law of God, which serves well the good as well as the adversary. And I feel I need to identify a word or two for you who spew evil and condemn as sin what you observe. Evil, that which intentionally pulls yourself or another from the path of goodness and into the breaking of laws, the use of another for unrighteous deeds and thoughts, and in general, that which is negative in wrong actions, deed, and thoughts. This is usually an error in judgment that allows for misdirection of intent and actions. And you should abhor evil and recognize sin and try to pull both into the light to be judged or discerned. For always either one will be attached to some human or human entities. But judgment is not yours to use except in the recognition of actions perpetrated. Evil is intentional, while usually sin is simply something that is. Forgiveness is something which must be limited to parties actually involved in an action or intent. In other words, you cannot forgive Clinton for sending your loved ones off to war if you don't have a loved one. But you do have a country called your motherland. And if he sends citizens off to war, you are involved personally. However, Every effort must be made to find worthy an act of forgiveness. To forgive is something that is for self. Never mind the other parties involved. To release and move forward requires forgiveness, but never forgetfulness. Do not forget anything that happens, lest you simply repeat and repeat the sins, errors, and make forgiveness worthless. And even if you can't seem to find redeeming graces evident in the Jewish control gained over your own beings, you need to consider very carefully your wrong attitudes about the matter. And why do you allow the negative attitudes to take over your world? Have you been so warped of mind that you cease to find the glory and creative capability of God Creator within self? Killing or disposing of your enemy doesn't do anything save warp self. And you can use the positive tools and attitudes which allow one to rise strong and tall and thank the perceived other for the gifts of laws set forth that also shelter you and yours. A good example is the use of the incorporation. We always use Nevada for privacy, to protect self and assets. Now, this was set forth by the most wealthy to protect themselves and their business from prying eyes and leeching government. Use these tools, friends. Please use these tools. They are legal and they are not against the laws of God. It is intelligent. Anything that breaks either of the law is not intelligent, and you will end up in the human's prison if they can arrange it against you. And you will note a surge in the reporting about radical clans, as in the KKK, the skinheads, etc. These are at the least immoral, for they are based on hate, inequality, and stupidity. But why all the sudden interest in them? To cause unrest in your dooryards until world fulfillment can be better established to confuse you. Any violent act against self or another is immoral, and at the very least in judgment or discernment. There are many ways to change the circumstance upon your world and turn about into goodness. But you must first learn and know what is the fundamental trouble or wrong involved. Only then can you fix that which is broken or correct that which is wrong. And on the topical question involved here, learn, and you shall prevail in change, in goodness. And all can prosper when you know what is taking place. You most surely do not need go forth with your sword and chop off heads, even your better. People have to be shown the better way. It is fact that a person will always move first away from pain. Then he will move toward perceived happiness where perceived pain is absent. Killing everybody along the way is not a solution, and therefore wars can never be a solution. The beast, however, will always grab the seat of power, so you must learn to judge and discern very carefully, and that means participation in your own lives. Important. God does not give energy to wrong, but Satan and his army does. Right or wrong have equal opportunity to grow and build. Only good has ability to create, wrong to destroy, confuse, and manipulate to serve and suit another. Human tends to be absorbed by the evil side of disposition, while human retains the capability of creating and replacing that evil with positive energy and goodness. Now, goodness is not created to suffer. This is a total misperception placed on people through religions. Religions are of man. Spirituality is of God, Creator. You are in the physical manifestation of man. Therefore, your spirituality must always direct your human being toward light and spiritual growth, lest you become entrapped in the very thing that you claim to detest. But as babies learn to walk, talk, and master growth, so too must each come to learn and know what is and what is wrong, that a society becomes unbalanced. The controllers like it as it is without your input. That is why you are kept ignorant and deceived. Do you simply want to wake up and smell the toast and coffee, or do you want to have for self some of that toast and coffee? It's up to you. You cannot be an electrical engineer until you learn how electricity behaves. Quoting part 20 of the Global Parasites. Does this explain Jewish political power? Little has yet been said in this commentary on the protocols about the political program contained in them. It is desirable that the points be taken separately in order that when our study turns to actual conditions in this country, the reader may be in a position to judge whether the written program agrees with the acted program as it may be seen all about us. The world program as outlined in this strange document turns upon many points, of some of which have already been discussed. Its success is sought in A, by securing financial control of the world. This is having already been secured by the overwhelming indebtedness of every nation through wars, and by the capitalistic, not the manufacturing or managerial, control of industry. By securing political control, which is easily illustrated by the condition of every civilized country today. By securing control of education, a control which has been steadily won under the blinded eyes of the people. By trivializing the public mind through a most complete system of allurement, which has just brought us into a period which requires the new word jazz to describe it. And E, by the sowing of seeds of disruption everywhere, not the seeds of progress, but of economical fallacies and revolutionary temper. All of these main objectives entail various avenues of action, none of which has been overlooked by the protocols. So in leading up to what the protocols have to say about the selection and control of presidents, it will be enlightening to take the views which these documents express about other phases of politics. It may be very interesting to those Jewish apologists who in all their pronouncements never discuss the contents of the protocol, to know that so far from their being a plea for monarchy, they are a plea for the most drastic and irresponsible liberalism in government. The powers behind the protocols appear to have absolute confidence in what they can do with the people once the people are made to believe that popular government has really arrived. The protocols instruct in frequent change. They, like elections, they approve frequent revisions of constitutions. They counsel the people to change their representatives often. In the kill box, Hatton says, I changed the word above from believe to instruct, because these are the very points upon which you lose face and battles. A set of papers with words on them can't believe anything. Only the people believing in the instructions and acting upon them. Now this is a silly thing, but in today's world, whole nations revolve around such rubbish. Now take this from the first protocol. The abstract conception of liberty made it possible for us to convince the crowd that government is only the management for the owner of the country, the people, and that the steward can be changed like a pair of worn-out gloves. The possibility of changing the representatives of the people has placed them at our disposal and, as it were, has placed them in our power as creatures of our purposes. And note also how this use of change is buried in this paragraph from the fourth protocol, which describes the evolution of a republic. Every republic passes through several stages. The first is that of senseless ravings, resembling those of a blind man throwing himself from right to left. The second is that of demagogy, which breeds anarchy and inevitably leads to despotism, not of a legal, open, and consequently responsible character, but an unseen and unknown. So such a despotism acts with even less scruple because it is hidden under cover and works behind the backs of various agents, the shifting and changing of which will not harm its secret power but serve it, since such changes will relieve the organization from the necessity of expending its resources on rewards for long service. Now, this changing of servants is not unknown in the United States. A former senator of the United States could easily testify to this if he only knew who did the changing. Time was when he was the tool of very Jewish lobbyists in the Senate, and his glib tongue lent charm and plausibility to every argument they wished to advance against the government's intentions. And secretly, however, the senator was receiving favors from a very high source, favors of a financial character. The time came when it was desirable to detach the senator. The written record of his favors was abstracted from its place of supposed secrecy. A newspaper system that has always been the ready organ of American Jewry made the exposure, and an indignant public did the rest. It may be interesting to those Jewish apologists who in all their pronouncements never discuss the contents of the protocols, and to know that so far from their being a plea for monarchy, they are a plea for the most drastic and irresponsible liberalism in government. The powers behind the protocols appear to have absolute confidence in what they can do with the people once the people are made to believe that popular government has really arrived. The protocols instruct infrequent change. They, like elections, they approve frequent revisions of constitutions, and they counsel the people to change their representatives often. Hat on in the kill box. I changed the word above from believe to instruct because these are the very points upon which you lose face and battles. A set of papers with words on them can't believe anything, only the people believing in the instructions and acting upon them. This is a silly thing, but in today's world, whole nations revolve around such rubbish. Take this from the first protocol. The abstract conception of liberty made it possible for us to convince the crowd that government is only the management for the owner of the country, the people, and that the steward can be changed like a pair of worn-out gloves. The possibility of changing the representatives of the people has placed them at our disposal and, as if it were, has placed them in our power as creatures of our purposes. So note also how this use of change is buried in this paragraph from the fourth protocol, which describes the evolution of a republic. In the 14th protocol, which begins, when we become rulers, it is pictured how hopeless the Gentile people will have become of any betterment of conditions through changes of government, and therefore will accept the promise of stability which the protocolists of that time will be prepared to offer. The masses will become so satiated with the endless changes of administration which we instigated among the Gentiles when we were undermining their governmental institution, that they will tolerate anything from us. The official who's changed most quickly in the country is the man who questions certain matters which come from Jewish sources. There must be a small army of such men in the United States today. Some of them do not know even now how it happened, and some are still wondering why perfectly legitimate and patriotic information should have been lost in an icy silence when they sent it in, and why they should have lost favor for sending it. And in Protocol 9 is full of the most amazing claims, of which these may serve as illustration. At the present time, if any government raises a protest against us, it is only for the sake of form. It is under our control, and it is done by our direction, for their anti-Semitism is necessary for keeping in order our lesser brothers. I will not explain this further, as already it has been the subject of numerous discussions between us. And this doctrine of the useless of anti-Semitism and the desirability by creating it where it does not exist are found in the words of Jewish leaders, ancient and modern. In reality, there are no obstacles before us. Our super government has such an extra legal status that it may be called by the energetic and strong word dictatorship. I can conscientiously say that at the present time, we are the lawmakers. In the protocol, this claim is made. De facto, we have already eliminated every government except our own, although de jure there are still many others left. Well, that is simple. The governments will exist under their own names, having authority over their own people. But the super government has unchallenged influence over all of them in matters pertaining to the Jewish nation, and particularly in matters pertaining to the purpose of the international Jew. Now, this 8th protocol shows how this can be. For the time being, until it will be safe to give responsible government positions to our brother Jews, we shall entrust them to people whose past and whose character are such that there is an abyss between them and the people, to people for whom, in case of disobedience to our orders, there will remain only trial or exile from public life, thus forcing them to protect our interests to their last breath. So in the 9th protocol again is this reference to party funds. The division into parties has placed them all at our disposal, inasmuch as in order to carry on a party struggle, it is necessary to have money, and we have it all. Now, there have been many investigations of campaign funds. None has ever yet gone deep enough to inquire into the international sources of these funds. And let's note in the kill box, the current events regarding this one, and yet once again, nothing is done even when the evidence is on the table. But note the continuation of party garbage. Now, in the United States, during the last 5 years, we have seen an almost complete Judaized administration and control of all the war activities of the American people. And this function of the regularly organized United States government during this time was practically confined to the voting of money. But the administration of the business end of the war was in charge of the government within a government, and this inner extra government was Jewish. So it is, of course, often asked why this was so. Well, the first answer given is that the Jews who were immediately placed in charge of the business administration of the war were competent men, the most competent men who could be found. And this was actually the answer given to an inquiry as to the reason for so large a part of the foreign policy of the United States, depending on the counsel of a certain group of Jews. They were the men who knew. No one else knew so much. The officials chosen by the people had a right to select the most efficient and able counsel they could find. Very well, let that stand. Now let the explanation be that in all the United States, the Jews were the only persons to be found who could handle the emergency with masterly ease. And we shall see more of this phase of the matter at another time. The war is not under discussion in this article, merely the fact that in any emergency, the government became distinctly Jewish. And in the kill box, Hatton, any argument this week? But the 2nd protocol would appear to throw a little light on the matter. The administrators chosen by us from the masses for their civility will not be persons trained for government, and consequently, they will easily become pawns in our game, played by our learned and talented counselors, specialists, educated from early childhood to administer. Now, as we know, our specialists have been acquiring the necessary knowledge for governing. The language is a trifle raw, as it usually is when Gentiles are under discussion. But the same fact, namely that Jewish specialists have come to the aid of Gentile administrators in an emergency, and when uttered for the consideration of the general public, may be very beautifully phrased. The untrained Gentile administrator must have help. His unpreparedness makes it necessary. And who knows it better than those who have the help to offer? The Gentile public has been taught to suspect the man who has had experience in politics or government. This, of course, makes the whole situation doubly easy for those whose specialty it is to give aid. Just what interest they aid will give when discovered a strong light upon their zeal. But in all that the protocols have to say about the political angle of the world program, nothing is of so great interest as that which concerns the selection and the control of presidents. In the kill box, please pay close attention, readers. The whole plan is outlined in the 10th protocol. The fact that the President of France seems to have been in mind is a localism. The plan is applicable elsewhere, indeed, has elsewhere its most perfect illustration. So this 10th protocol then leads gradually up to the subject tracing the evolution of rulers from autocrat to president, and of nations from monarchies to republics. The language of this passage is particularly objectionable, but no more so than can be found in the current Jewish literature, where boasting of power is indulged in. Now, unpleasant as the whole attitude is, it is valuable as showing in just what light the supporters of the protocol program view the Gentiles and their dignities. It must be borne in mind that the Jewish ideal is not a president, but a prince and a king. The Jewish students of Russia marched the streets in 1918 singing this hymn. We have given you a God, now we will give you a king. The new flag of Palestine, now permitted to fly without hindrance, bears insignia, as does every synagogue of a Jewish king. The Jewish hope is that the throne of David shall be set up again, as doubtless it will be, and none of these things is to be decried in the least, nor to be regarded with anything but a decent respect. But they should be borne in mind as a sidelight on the express contempt for Gentile presidents and legislatures. In the kill box, surely you didn't think the Israeli flag with the Star of David was generated just to satisfy a need of a new stolen state called Israel? And the 10th protocol reaches the theme of president thus. Then the rise of the Republican era became possible. And then in the place of a sovereign, we substituted a caricature of him, a president picked from the crowd. Such was the foundation of the mine we laid underneath the Gentile people, or more accurately, the Gentile peoples. And it is with something of a shock that one reads that men with a past are especially favored for the presidential office. Men with a past have become president in various countries, including the United States. There is no doubt of that. In the kill box, and boy, did they pick a good one with a bad past in Zipper Billy. Now, in some instances, the particular scandal that constituted the past has been publicly known. In other cases, it has been hushed up and lost in a maze of rumor. In the kill box, Hatton states, Come on, people, never mind the sex trashing. Clinton was a very bad boy. He dabbled in crime and drug running from the time he was a child and worked in coalition with the CIA and George Bush to further importation of drugs right through Mena, Arkansas. The sex stuff and the war on stars to keep that part of his past from coming out because it will reflect on others of high positions. So Clinton is using blackmail at others at the minute, and Hillary is even more into blackmailing some of the players. But sexual indiscretions are the least of Billy's problems. In at least one case, it was made the special property of a syndicate of men who, while protecting the official from public knowledge, compelled him to pay rather stiffly for their service. Men with a past are not uncommon, and it is not always the past but the concealment of it that concerns them most. And in this lack of frankness, this distrust of the understanding and mercy of the people, they usually fall into another slavery, namely the slavery of political or financial blackmail. And we will manipulate the election of presidents whose past contains some undisclosed dark affair, some Panama. Then they will be faithful executors of our orders from fear of exposure and from the natural desire of every man who has attained a position of authority to retain the privileges, emoluments, and the dignity associated with the position of president. The use of the word Panama here refers to the various scandals which arose in French political circles over the original efforts to construct the Panama Canal. If the present form of the protocols had been written at a later date, they might have referred to the Marconi wireless scandals in England, though on second thought they would not have done so because certain men were involved who were not Gentiles. In the kill box, Hatton says, Dr. Ed, I think you can see right here where Mr. Tesla fits into this puzzle. Herzl, the great Jewish Zionist leader, uses the expression in the Jewish state. Speaking of the management of the business of Palestine, he says that the Society of the Jews will see to it that the enterprise does not become a Panama but a Suez. Everyone still with me in the kill box, Hatton says? That the same expression should occur in Herzl and in the protocols is significant because it has also another significance which will be described at another time. But it must be clear to the reader, however, that no one writing for the general public at this day would refer to a Panama in a man's past. The reference would not be understood. It is this practice of holding a man under obligation which makes it needful on the part of the true publicist to tell the truth, and the whole truth about aspirants for public office. It is not enough to say of a candidate that he began as a poor boy and then became successful. Well, how did he become successful? Well, how explain the rise of his fortunes? Sometimes the clue leads deep into the domestic life of the candidate. It may be told of a man, for example, that he helped another out of a scrape by marrying the woman involved and received a sum of money for doing so. It may be told of another that he was implicated by his too friendly relations with another's wife, but was relieved of his predicament by the astute diplomacy of powerful friends, to whom thereafter he felt himself in debt of honor. It is strange that in America affairs, at least the woman note is predominant. In our higher offices that has more frequently occurred than any other, oftener than the money note. In the kill box, Hatton says, but you see, something came out about that, changed the moral attitudes far worse than adultery, philandering, and sex-oriented stuff. You have to be set up and then wiped out by something really important like money games. In European countries, however, where the fact of a man's being entangled illegitimately with a woman does not carry so heavy a stamp of shame with it, the controlled men have been found to have pasts of another character. So the whole subject is extremely distasteful. But truth has its surgical duties to perform, and this is one of them. When, for example, a pivotal assemblage like that of the peace conference is studied, and the men who are most subject to Jewish influences are isolated and their past history is carefully traced, there is almost no difficulty whatever in determining the precise moment when they passed over into that fateful condition, which, while it did not hinder them of public honors for 1 hour, made them unchangeably the servants of a power the public did not see. The puzzling spectacle which the observer sees of the great leaders of the Anglo-Saxon races closely surrounded and continuously counseled by the princes of the, in the kill box, recognized Semitic race is explained only by a knowledge of those leaders, past, and those words of the protocols, "We will manipulate." The election of presidents whose past contains some undisclosed dark affair. And where this Jewish domination of officials is glaringly apparent, it may be safely assumed that the custody of the secret is almost entirely with that race. And when necessity arises, it may be a public service for those in possession of the facts to make them public, not for the purpose of destroying reputations, but for the purpose of damning for all time the most cowardly practice. Politically, so the Jewish publicists tell us, Jews do not vote as a group. Because of this, so we are told, they have no political influence. And moreover, we are told they are so divided among themselves that they cannot be led in one direction. And it may be true that when it is a question of being for anything, the Jewish community may show a majority and a minority opinion. A small minority, it is likely to be. But when it becomes a question of being against anything, the Jewish community is always a unit. Now, these are facts to which any ward politician can testify. Any man in political life can test it for himself by announcing that he will not permit himself to be dominated by Jews or anybody else. And just let him mention Jews in that manner. He will no longer have to read about Jewish solidarity. He will have felt it. And note that in a vote, this Jewish solidarity can accomplish anything it wishes. The Jew's political strength is not in his vote, but in the pull of, say, 7 men at the seat of government. And the Jews, a political minority so far as votes are concerned, were a political majority so far as influence was concerned during the last 5 years. They ruled. They boast that they ruled. The mark of their rule is everywhere, in the kill box, Hatton states. Note this was written in 1920. So the controlling rule has been since, at least in the U.S., totally held since 1915. Now, the note which everyone observes in politics, as in the press, is the fear of the Jews. This fear is such that nowhere are the Jews discussed as are, say, the Armenians, the Germans, the Russians, or the Hindus. What is this fear but reflection of the knowledge of the Jews' power and their ruthlessness in the use of it? It is possibly true, as many Jewish publicists say, that what is called anti-Semitism is just a panic fear. It is a dread of the unknown, the uncanny spectacle of an apparently poor people who are richer than all, of a very small minority which is more powerful than all, creates phantoms before the mind. It is very significant that those who most assume to represent the Jews are quite content that the fear should exist. They wish it to exist, to keep it delicately poised and always there, though not too obtrusively, is an art they practice. But once the balance is threatened, their crudeness instantly appears. Then comes the threat by which it is hoped to reestablish the fear again. And then the threat fails, and there comes the wail of anti-Semitism. So how strange is that the Jews should not see that the most abject form of anti-Semitism is just this fear which they are willing to have felt toward them by their neighbors. To inspire fear, what is more dreaded by the normal man? And yet what more delights an inferior race? Now, a great service is done when the people are emancipated from this fear. It is a process of emancipation that Jewish publicists attack. It is this they call anti-Semitism. It is not anti-Semitism at all. It is the only course that can prevent anti-Semitism. So the process involves several steps. The extent of the Jewish power must be shown. To this, of course, strong Jewish objection is made, though no strong disproof can be made. Then the existence of this power must be explained. It can be explained only by the Jewish will to power, as it may be called, or by the deliberate program which is followed in the attainment of the power. When the method is explained, half the damage is undone. The Jew is not a Superman. He is bright. He is intense. His philosophy of material things leaves him free to do many things from which his neighbor draws back. But given equal advantages, he is not a Superman. The Yankee is more than his equal any time, but the Yankee has an inborn inclination to observe the rules of the game. When the people know by what means this power is gained, when they are informed how, for example, political control is seized, as it has been in the United States, the very method takes all the glamour from the power and shows it to be a rather sordid thing after all. And this series of articles is attempting to take these orderly steps, and it is believed the complete effort will justify itself to reasonable minds, both Jewish and Gentile. And in the present article, one important means of power has been described on the authority of the protocol. Whether the method laid down by the protocol is worth considering or not depends entirely on whether it can be found in actual affairs today. And it can be found. The two tally. The parallel is complete. It were well for the Jew, of course, if no trace of him could be found in either the written or the actual program, but he is there, and it is illogical for him to blame anyone but himself for being there. And certainly it is small defense against the fact to heap abuse upon one who discloses a fact. We have agreed that the Jews are clever, but they are not so clever as to be able to cover their work. There is a certain element of weakness in them which reveals the whole matter in the end. And even the revelation would not mean much if the thing revealed were not wrong. The Jews have never gained any measure of success so great that the world cannot check it. The world is engaged in a great checking tactic now, and if there are still prophets among the Jews, they should lead their people in another path. The proof and the fruit of any exposure of the world program is the removal of the element of fear from the peoples among whom the Jews live. Issue of September the 18th of 1920. End of quote. Can the nation say the United States be changed? Yes. Easily? No. And the change will have to come from outside the typical government that you have in place. You haven't a prayer of changing the one who have or replacing it with something new and honestly honorable. When the whole barrel of apples is spoiled and rotten, you will have to consider a whole new approach. But that can be accomplished in the U.S. as in no other nation already usurped and controlled by these elements of the elite one-worlders. But indeed, there are a whole big bunch of people in every powerful nation who would change it if shown the way and to recognize the problems. Now, most know the problems except you sleeping masses under the mind-warped processing. It only requires insight, foresight, long-range sight, and the ability to create that which is necessary. And that comes from recognizing the absolute lack of anything backing and of the elite's holdings. So, now we know who they are, and that isn't a bad start for today, is it? They have presented an illusion of money, value, moral acceptance, and thus and so. But they have also incredibly incited the hatred of those in opposition and bearing the brunt of their outrageous crimes and deceptions. So a massive change could come about simply by turning unto truth and God, but logically and reasonably speaking, it won't. Therefore, there will be some of the old arrangement prophecies that have to come about, for the writers of the prophecies will have to see to it that it does, even if it is against themselves. But to every man a choice. When a man gains love, he changes within self and stops the hatred and starts thinking. And when thinking, men are then shown a way. They will take it and create that which they desire. And when this is done in the name of God, not some trumped up idol to worship, there is no enemy anywhere who can do a thing to stop what is happening. So, to you, dear ones, find it difficult to wait and see that things are being accomplished? I can't make you see, hear, or experience. I can only assure you in my own loop that there are making incredible and beyond your dream inroads, that the solution's at hand. But the team is tired, and no matter how hard or how fast we run, so far the enemy is able to make the run difficult and miserable. However, God chooses carefully, and those he had placed in responsible positions will make it through one way or another. A bit frazzled and worn, but we shall make it, for some of you out there have made it possible. And there is always the presence of the distractors, even right among us, and the desire to be distracted. So the two get together, and the great amounts of time and energy are expanded where it should not be. But it is, and so be it. Until one of you of the nuclei realizes the distractions and the distractors, you will slow the progress. It is always quite easy to cast about and discern another's problems or distractions, but rarely your own. Why? Because your distractions are not considered by you to be distractions. Let me example a personal focus. With the coming of an email capability, EJ's workload has doubled or tripled. Dharma is again out of control because everything from arguments to Kitty's problems are handed off to her. But it is through the computer networks that we can get viewing and hearing, so we really can't negate the computers, can we? Now our evidence is more predominantly global and foreign than ever, so that more time is consumed constantly, but with necessary business and interchange. We have foreign diplomats of such high importance as you would stagger you, waiting for each page to come from these fingers. There is no substitute, therefore, for this task, and no way to assemble help at this time. So we keep right on moving, and when we can't stagger another step, somehow someone will be ready to take some load, and then more load, and finally we will have a larger team. But it starts with the mundane, because we need no more help steeped in their own ways and directions. And who can't move beyond the meditation phase and actually do the work itself? I am told that if we just had more meetings, we could get our energy renewed and our focus reestablished. Well, interestingly enough, Dharma's running as hard as she can. And she has to be there if we have a meeting, doesn't she? Not to bring the cakes for someone else could do that, but just to speak. And lungs that can't hold air can't allow for long speeches, but can allow for lots of finger exercises. And moreover, we have experienced and thus learned that our enemies are among us, our strategies and just our own daily privacy is totally invaded and moved out of the privacy of our family to be spun and twisted in the hands and minds and publications of the very adversary himself. And who restores Dharma? And who, save 2 or 3, continues to shore up the financial needs for the work here? This is in no way a reflection on you who send to keep the paper going forward, would have been over long before now if you had not stepped in and saved the day with your contributions above subscriptions. And I find that around here there are almost none who will watch the very news coming forth more than once, if that much a day, and then turn it off because you can't stand it. I asked Dharma to leave this keyboard, and every minute not at this typing, she's studying the broadcast from every direction, every channel and talk show. It is therein you find what is really happening. So you guys say, well, we get it from contact or these writings. Fine. It is then apparent that you don't want meetings quite badly enough to give relief to the production point. And yes, you are right. The circle spirals around, and surely enough, the cost of mailings rises, and we don't have room for more information anyway, and stay alive at all. This is the plan at work, and the very best example that we can offer. And many people within our circle are running for our lives, so please, this example is exactly that, an example using something to which you can relate. Arguments about material do not accomplish anything, and we have no time for debates. I know what is real, what is truth. So an argument with me is useless, as most arguers state right off the top of their letters. And I chuckle as I recall early on over the topic of, and they called his name Emmanuel, that the publishers of some of the same materials started large arguments with Green about the materials. And I responded, so the next arguments came from the committee appointed to handle that ET and that insane receiver. However, the letter started with, don't have Hatton respond because he can just blow out our arguments because we are not so quick of wit. No, I am not kidding you. Either I am or I am not. So if I am not, doesn't that scare you a bit that Dharma is so quick of wit as to outthink and outrun the entire world population? And she makes no claim of such, but she will be first to tell you that she has gotten a real education in just about every subject there is. And even Dr. Young would probably give her an honorary degree in quantum physics as well as qualifying as a writer, which she still claims to not be. Peculiar, isn't it? She is not a Jew, but is a Semite. But she is pale of color and yet is Egyptian of origin in this particular job. Interesting. Not really, once you know what life is about and is. Do we have some bond? Beyond all human realization, as I do, I, with most of you who read this material and know the reality of this time and this place in historical sequence, we are already woven as the threads into a finished tapestry with myriads of colors and textures, and even if taken apart, we do not lose our DNA picture engraved forever upon the timelessness of eternity and universality. Are you in the picture? That is not for me to answer, but rather for me to ask. Are you in the picture? Oh, indeed, modest ones. You do know and you experience for something so much greater than a doodle ride on some ship or other, but for the very gift of life itself. EJ and Dharma don't even bother to study the heavens as they once did, for they know where God is located, and the trappings and show of a few moving objects has no longer much interest. Appreciation is always present, having to meditate on one star or another, or even the belly button wastes valuable production time. So we do that sort of thing only when the balance has been blown by some of the necessary distractions that require handling. Others are the same. Once again, I only use examples. Moreover, it is understood that all ones entering the circle must catch up. But if you who have always been within this circle and haven't caught up are not in such good standing. Most right here under our noses do not even read all the material. Now, don't you, who can't wait to get into your hands and heads, find that shocking and appalling? No, I don't. I find it typical. Most people would join any group just to search, and usually for betterment of self's acquisitions, be they human or material. So there's little interest in the accomplishment beyond that job and the pay they're from. People, there isn't even a group here to hold anyone as in membership. And if you cease to study the truth as we bring it, you don't have anything here. I repeat, you don't have anything here. And some, if the pay were cut off, would not even consider staying a day longer, and that would be blamed on the excuse of having to work when some were not working when they came here. Good. It is an excellent sorting tool. Am I not afraid that some will see this and be offended? No. The ones who would be don't read the stuff. The others know their positions are set in cement and would work days to support themselves and give all night to serve God if that were necessary. And in some of the jobs that is the case. And only the service itself is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and sometimes double up that. I do not deal in what ifs or shoulds. We deal here with what is, and that is all we have in the here and the now. We do the best we can with what is. Good strokes are nice, but we work mostly without anything except complaints and gigantic efforts to insult, discount, discredit, and destroy us. But the love and support of the rest of the team and the crew suffices. And even if they be few, they are in truth and in love, and it is insufficient unto our needs. And we know that what we do is truth and what we do is right. There is no energy strength greater than that. We chuckled when Dr. Ed sent up a note and another book to be typed and inquired as to whether or not Dharma had worn off the letters of her new keyboard yet. Well, the funny thing is that, yeah, indeed, they were going. But this time she got smart and weekly lacquers over the print. We laugh because she can certainly tell by looking at the keyboard which alphabet letters are the most used. We also find it amusing that people say and think we have a great consolidated membership game going here daily. Dharma has not even seen most of the people here who work daily on the same projects in weeks, and as with Dr. Young, in months. So please, readers, when somebody calls this a cult, will you please turn about and confront them? Call them to their faces what they are, uninformed, ignorant, or simply, you are a liar. It works every time, and truth will work every time if you simply use it. So when you make stupid excuses, you hurt self and everyone with you. And until you are not ashamed of God in your life, you have big problems. Adonai, Aton. The Greeks will know what the symbol means.